Insights. I am the Director of Client Success over here at Zibtek, and then we've got Brandon. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Sales here at Zibtek. I know I'm going to get roasted on that one now.
Forgot your title for a second.
I got my title. I don't know what I do here. Yeah, so I'm over the sales team. We've got a team here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then also in Bangalore, India, and I run those teams.
Awesome. Yeah, and so today what we wanted to cover is AI in the creative space. Last week we covered like software development using AI and AI tools. Really got into that. I think we had some really great interactions with the people on the webinar. We're able to cover a lot of great topics. So we wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of the kind of subtopics, and one of the items that we got a lot of requests for were more on the creative side. I know a lot of our webinars we get pretty more on like kind of the technical side. So I'm able to cover a lot of that. But this month we're going to get more on the creative side. So we're going to be going over to Brandon. I think he's really going to run this one this go around. I'll be taking a back seat on this guy. So I'll let Brandon kick things off, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. I appreciate it. So the reason, and just disclaimer here, we're not experts in this field of generative art, but my background is in art. In fact, I had a degree in illustration all the way back a long time ago. So that's kind of why I've kept up on this subject, and it's very interesting to me. So as we dial into it, that was kind of why I'm more heading this aspect of it. I kind of wanted to go back a little bit with Web3 because Web3 was coined, and a lot of people, maybe especially this group, more technology advanced, but Web3 was coined by Ethereum's co-founder Gavin Wood. That was in 2014. So I didn't realize that it had gone back that far when I was actually coined that. So Web3 consists of everything from blockchain, semantic web, decentralization, micropayments, and then AI, of course. And so we really wanted to dive into AI, which we did starting last time, and kind of how the world is going to see that and how it's playing out. A lot of this stuff, the advent of ChatGPT, I'm going to say that slowly because I did get roasted last time for that. That pretty much came mainstream in November, but it started way back in 2019. So with all of that, there's this huge hype around all these natural language type programs and how they're being instituted and how people are thinking about them. So we kind of want to talk about that and have some discussion around that. As you know, every other time you can jump in whenever you want, ask questions. If you even wanted to come on live because you're like, hey, these guys don't know what they're talking about, feel free to do that. We're happy to have you. So thanks for everybody being here. So first of all, I wanted to get into generative art, which is basically anything that's created with an autonomous system. So that's a non-human system, right? So the programs that we're seeing right now, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, OpenAI's DALL-E, if you've opened those up and gotten some of those programs and started using those, there's some really fun and exciting things that you can do with the creative, the visual arts. And so along with that, there's some problems, concerns, as with every other technology that comes out. The first thing that I wanted to discuss was the acceptance versus the resistance part of that. And there's a lot of polarizing camps versus what's going to happen with that and how is this going to all play out. And to kind of start with what that looks like is people are asking the question, well, is it going to take jobs? Is it going to complicate things? Is it going to, there's a whole host of things that we'll go through today. So the first thing that I think about is, if you can go in and you can create these images at kind of a dizzying pace, right? Why are we so opposed to that? I mean, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, like I think that's a good point. Especially when you bring up the point of, taking jobs and those types of things. I think it's really helpful in kind of like enablement and for people like, for example, I don't think AI on the creative side is ever going to replace creative people, right? Because it can't really come up with new ideas. It can only really like work off of ideas that exist. So you still need those people, that those creative types. But where I've seen it, especially just more on the creative side, where I've seen it really like flourish, be really great, is you might have these people that are really great writers or storytellers that aren't working for a company or anything, and they want to be able to get this content out there, but they don't know how to do illustrations or videos or anything. So they can rely on these tools to help put some illustrations and visuals along with their writing, right? So it really enhances their creative skill, where they may not have the money, right, to pay somebody to do illustrations and those types of things. So that's where I really see this type of stuff flourishing. And I think it's really great. I still, again, right, I'm not an expert. I can't, speak on it too much, but I really don't see it ever taking over those creative jobs. But like, maybe some of those freelancer guys might lose a little bit of work, where there's a writer that might come to them and ask them for some illustrations. They can more now rely on these AI tools, but it definitely takes, and I think we've actually spoken to some of your acquaintances that are kind of like experts in the place of this AI art piece, where it's not just, you can't just come in and say, hey, create a picture for me like this and that's it, it's done. There's actually a technique and practice to it, to like honing that skill in to get you the exact like images that you want from these different AI tools.
Yeah, and we're going to sidebar hopefully some of those and get some content out there with some of these guys that are experts. So that's a great point. I kind of looked into the past, like who has rejected technology, and I found Alexander Winton in 1898, the first gasoline car. And he went to a banker, and the banker was like, man, you're crazy. Like, what are you doing? And everybody made fun of this guy because he wanted to separate, the buggy from the horse, and it's automated. And they thought that was crazy, but eventually, obviously we now have cars. So I wondered, why do we always kick against that? The change, it's unknown, and it creates fear. There was someone that talked about the 9/11 catastrophe and how that all went down. And when it first happened, people actually, even though they heard that this was, they were in danger, they actually doubted whether that was happening. So there's not this mass, like you hear in some sort of terror attack or something like that. People aren't like clamoring to get out of the building. They're not running for the door. They're not screaming. They're actually doubting first. And I think that's what we do, right? And I think that's what we're doing right now, is we're doubting. We can't see the future. We can't see what's going to happen. So we're like, and we're afraid, this is going to take our jobs, or this is going to create some scenario that we're not comfortable with. But ultimately, if we look at the past, it's only set the stage for something that's better and increased productivity in this case, which it could. So some of the things that people are talking about are algorithm advancements. And how are those algorithms actually, how are they doing this stuff? Well, they're taking all these data sets, and right now data sets are being looked at because where are they getting these things? Are they sourcing these from copyrighted content? Do they have the ability also to create absolute originality, which you mentioned? So if you look at that, if they are taking these, and really a lot of these Midjourney and Valley and these guys are, they recognize this, and so they're really taking precautionary measures to make sure that none of these things are copyrighted, and that's almost impossible, right? But I think they're doing their part to try and prevent that. You can also submit your name as an artist. For example, I do art on the side. So I could say, you can't use my data sets and kind of prevent that. So there are things coming out like that, which I think are interesting. But really, do the algorithms have the ability to create absolute originality? Maybe you can touch on that. There's an argument in that, by the way.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, I think it can get so close that the argument is it is original, but it's still technically not, you know. But I think that's, yeah, you're kind of getting into those like theoretical, you know, those pretty out there discussions of like what is original, what's not original, right? Everything's kind of built off of something. So, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, these AI tools are all just, it's just large data sets, right? They're just repurposing data that's already out there, which I mean, I guess, like you said, there's an argument to say any artist is already doing that themselves, right? They're not coming up completely with ideas completely out of themselves. They're basing it off of something else, and it grows and turns into something. But yeah, you know, it's you know, as you said too, it's hard to predict the future, right? And say what's it going to be like 20 years from now, 10 years from now. But I would say in the near future, right, it looks like it's, like I said, you know, more of an enablement type of a tool, right, to kind of help people and assist people and improve, but not as a full replacement. I think we're still a ways away from that. But again, you know, kind of going back to jobs, the nice thing is, you know, I'm sure when the first automobile came out, there's a lot of, you know, ferrymen and people that bred and groomed horses lost their jobs. You know, there wasn't as much of a need for those, but then obviously mechanics and, you know, oil pumps and all those things started, you know, they started getting jobs in those fields. So you might lose jobs in one area, but they'll always be replaced typically with another job in another area, right? So that's more an expert using AI or working with AI is going to be, you know, the new job that's replacing somebody that's doing it all themselves from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. And so the answer to will it kill some jobs? Of course. Absolutely. But will it create new ones? Also, absolutely, yes. The thing that it could do in art, graphic design, you know, 3D animation, that sort of thing, it will actually identify the people that shouldn't be in that space, right? It'll actually amplify that. So it will also springboard artists with unique ideas. So the process of creating, which is sometimes, you know, some people love that process. Some people want to get through the later stages of the process. So for instance, if I'm doing a painting and I want to sketch out an idea or concept, but let's say I don't want to do that. I just want to get straight to my painting. And there's arguments about whether you should project, and many artists project their work onto their canvas and then begin the painting process. But if you can take generative art and sketch out that concept and it's fully fleshed out, and then you just paint that, that's one advantage. So really that springboarding of doing things, and this is also in development, right? I mean, it's going to allow us to do things that, you know, that are being done repetitiously, but now you can just do it quickly and get to really what you want to do. So not saying that's right or wrong, or that's what every artist or creative will think, but it's some of the reality of that. And then also the final work versus the artistic process. So some people, again, they want to get to the end result, but others are more about the process. So you kind of have to figure out, you know, where you land in that space, and I think use it accordingly. But is it original? I guess that depends on your definition of it, right? Mm-hmm. Again, some are saying yes, it is. Some are saying not. When you were saying that, I was thinking, if we were to ask someone to imagine a color that's never been seen before, we would think that's impossible. Yet we know the spectrum has many colors that we've never seen before, right? And so really what you're saying is we've taken all of these elements, all these data points, and really that's what artists are doing, right? They're taking a landscape and they might copy that landscape verbatim, right? So what is that original? Well, of course, because they're creating that in their own style. So they're repurposing that concept. And so I really think that there's going to continue to be arguments on both sides of that, and I think eventually we'll kind of get to that end result. But
yeah, I think it definitely will, in a way, almost like devalue art. You know, art will always have value, Art's always going to be necessary, but I definitely think it will become more accessible because it is such a specialized skill, right? Like somebody for like me, for example, I don't have an artistic bone in my body. So when I see somebody, you know, like Brandon that can paint, that can come up with these original ideas and actually express it and put it on the canvas, that's valuable for me, right? Like if I want that kind of art, I have to find someone with that special set of skills. That's something I can't do. Still something I would definitely struggle with, but now with these new AI tools, it's becoming to be where maybe I could create something in that realm, right? Like I have these tools that will allow me to get closer to what Brandon can do. Still can't do what Brandon does, but I can get closer, which will in some way devalue some of these artists, right? And some of their work. It kind of goes into development a little bit as well, right? Like a few years ago, software development was a lot more kind of, I guess, niche. Like there was far fewer software developers a few years ago than there are today. You're starting to see it's taught in schools, like elementary school and kindergarten and all these things. They're starting to learn coding. I know like here in Utah, there's actually, I don't know if it's chained across other states, but there's several locations called like Code Ninja where you can take your, like I think starting at like 4 years old, you can take your kids in and they can learn to code. So it in a way devalues some of these positions a little bit, right? There's going to be more of them out there, more people with that general knowledge. So they're not going to be so highly, qualified or specialized. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those jobs are going away. It's just going to become that there's more of them, but then that's what kind of sets us up to that next echelon of skills, right? Now it's going to be, oh, you're a developer, but you're a developer that also knows these AI tools or these AI skills to build upon that. Same with artists, right? Like you still have that leg up. Somebody like Brandon has that leg up on me because he has these original creative ideas that I don't have, but now he can use that special set of skills he has along with AI to set himself again like another step above me, right? And not let me level the playing ground by just using the AI tool. So what we have found is with these AI tools, whether it's more of like on an engineering side, development side, or if it's more on a creative side, those people that already had those skills, if they just ignore AI, I think that gap's going to close on them quite a bit. But if they use AI as a tool, just like everyone else is, they're going to continue to keep that gap and keep their skill set, above everyone else.
Yeah, no, those are great points. Do you have any questions? We kind of open that up for questions, so I want to make sure. Feel free to ask any questions if you have any.
Yeah.
But really, I think what you're saying is absolutely true. So it's really going to focus on, where creatives have kind of been in an interesting position before. I think that's going to all change. That whole paradigm is going to shift. Like you're saying, where a lot of it has been production based, right? If you can produce, if you're a developer, like developers, they started making a ton of money because, they could do something that no one else could do. But if now the AI can assist in that, I'm not saying it can do it fully, because it's going to have to be guided. And that's the whole point, is everything's going to have to be guided by the professional, by the expert. But I do think, like you're saying, that is going to give the creatives of the world a leg up, because people are going to be going to them for ideas, for these new concepts. And, how do you see spatial computing, which was metaverse, but then metaverse was terrible. So how do we envision spatial computing? How do you envision these worlds where we're going to dive into them with AR and VR and all this stuff? And, how does the world look in the future with purchasing products? You can go in right now, you can go into a metaverse and you can purchase, sorry to say this, NFTs, that's a swear word these days, but NFTs, or you can actually buy products from companies that are currently doing that. So that's really what the creatives of the world are going to advance in. And so that's pretty exciting for us. We're just waiting to see, really not waiting, like you have to jump in, you have to dive in and try and figure out. I see all these groups like clamoring. It seems like there's like this really big pause, or maybe even an unrest, where people are like, Web3 is terrible right now, NFTs are terrible, but there's a lot of groups out there right now that I know of who are working together and just trying to figure these things out. They're building, they're imagining, and they're creating these spaces where pretty soon they're going to come out, and whoever's not there is going to be left behind, or just enjoy the fruits of that. So the next part of it is the legal ramifications, and I'm not going to get into this too heavily because I'm not an attorney and I don't know what all that's going to look like, but who owns the IP? Is that something you have an idea about, or?
No, that's something I've honestly wondered about, and I think that is kind of for some people probably very scary, and I think for some people the fact that hasn't been hardened is probably exciting. Yes. For some people, they're like, it maybe opens up some freedom of things that they can do and not worry about the law, because I don't think the law is caught up to AI. I mean, and I think it'll be a long time coming, because even when you see the government, and the law and everything, Congress get involved with, like, when they interviewed Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, you'll see when they're asking these guys these questions, you can tell that these, some of these older folk in Congress, like, don't understand technology. They're still trying to figure out how their data is processed and handled by Facebook. So I think we're quite a ways behind, them figuring out how to handle and contain AI, right, with the IP and everything. Like, it is kind of a crazy unknown. It's coming as Mark Zuckerberg AI generated. I think there's a pretty good argument for that. He might be a lizard person or AI generated now. Who knows? He's probably a real person, but the last 10 years, who knows?
I think so.
I think it's anybody's guess on that one.
Yeah, so I think intellectual property is a big one, and I think right now we're seeing a ton of stuff come out with the government, the SEC, and Coinbase, and they're in the hot seat. So obviously, people are thinking in terms of the IP with all these generative arts, and I think the biggest problem is the style train, right? If your algorithm is style trained, I think that's where we're going to get into some problems. You're using a style or a copyright protected. There's no usage to that. And so what I've seen is artists are coming out now, and it was Drake. I think we talked about that last time, but the song by Drake came out. It was identical to how he sounds. The song was great and people liked it. So what he decided to do was license his sound, his name, his voice. And I think that's a great way to do it. So if there are works out there by people who are creative and they can monetize that by offering licensing and stuff like that, I think that's a smart way to do it. But I think if these algorithms are going out and their style training, then I think that we're going to run into some big problems. They're going to have lawsuits, and there's going to be a lot of lawsuits come up and stuff like that. So, but again, that's not my field of study, so I can't really speak much on that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really interesting, and just trying to keep an eye on time here, but the trust factor. So with this whole paradigm shift, we're starting to see things come out, and really it was already there with deep fakes and stuff like that, where they're taking celebrities and AI generating them so that they're in a scenario, looks just like them, they talk like them. Pretty soon what's going to happen is we're going to have all of this content, and we don't know really what's real and what's not real. Like all the way from computers to phones to what we see in content and social media. I think that we're going to have a big problem with trust. And what I think it boils down to is ultimately, and this is maybe really far-fetched and maybe extreme, but I think that one-on-one is really going to come back into play, and be really important. Like, I trust that I'm talking to you. I know you. I know you, and I trust you. I know that you're talking to me, and that's really the only thing that I can verify. Is that something you've thought about or considered?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it probably goes into every industry and everything. But if you're emailing somebody or even on a call or anything, like, it's hard to understand how much of the conversation, even, even if you're having a conversation with someone that you've just met, but if it's, over a webinar or a call or anything like that, sometimes it's hard to gauge how much of that knowledge and information they're giving you is based off of their own knowledge, or how much of it they're getting through ChatGPT or something, right. So it goes all the way down to that. I think that obviously at more at the higher level of just content and information and deep fakes and all of these things, is the person I'm watching real? Is the content I'm watching real? But did a real person even write this? It is pretty crazy, and I think that's something everyone's worried about. But yeah, it does kind of boil down further and further down to even at this level, there's who's to say, Brandon and I are even real on this, or even half the content, the items we've discussed. How do we know we didn't pull us all up through ChatGPT?
How I know I'm here.
That we even know about any of this stuff. So it is weird. We're getting into a kind of a crazy realm of that. And I think, like you said, there's even more and more value to having a physical sit down and conversation with somebody, because that's really truly the only way that you can kind of pass through that barrier of this is this person and this is their knowledge and their experience, and not something that's generated for them.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I wrote something. I did a little research on the psychology, and so I did write this down because I'm also not a psychologist, but it says overwhelming, unbelievable, and even harmful content desensitizes. And then it goes into how it desensitizes. So society will experience decline in empathy and increase in cynicism, right? So we've become more cynical when we can't empathize with people, but we can't do that because we feel like, we're being fed all this wrong, or we don't know if it's wrong or right or what, and all of the content, the amount of content is just going to desensitize. Well, if we don't have empathy, there's an erosion of that empathy. It increases distrust and constrains human relationships, which is actually pretty concerning. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in that space to find ways, and maybe it's in programming, maybe it's in social solutions, something like that. But there's going to be a lot of opportunities to kind of quell those issues. And so, it's wide open. It's a blue ocean opportunity with what's going on with AI and all this Web3 stuff. So it's exciting, and I'm not one to push against it. I'm definitely an early adopter. I'll try almost anything with new technologies and just see what I can do with it, because I do have that mind where I can come up with new kind of concepts and how to use a particular technology and be creative with it. But I understand, the fears involved in that, and what that could do with our society, and who knows how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I think finding ways to be genuine and show that you're genuine is going to become more and more valuable. It's valuable today. I think it's always been valuable, but like you said, as it kind of spreads, we're getting further and further away from what is genuine and what's not genuine, and I think that becomes more valuable. But one thing, just to kind of loop back on some of the items we were talking about earlier, I kind of connect it back into obviously more of our space of software development and handling all of that, kind of using these tools again, right? Like Dolly is more it's really helpful for ideation, right? People that aren't artists can use it in a great way. Artists can use it as a way to even just kind of form ideas, or even what you were mentioning earlier of, if you want to paint something, typically you'll still kind of sketch it up and come up with some ideas and figure it out, and kind of brainstorm some stuff before you really start putting paint on canvas, before you probably start, using up some of those more expensive paints you got. You want to kind of figure out what you want to do. So some of these tools like Dolly can be great. I know on our side with some of our more UI, UX, there's tools like Vasily is a pretty popular one. That can kind of help you with some AI, like wireframing and design. It can automate some things for you, and also even kind of help you get kicked off on the right start. Sometimes, right, creative people still have creative blocks. So some of these tools can kind of help just get the brain juices flowing, and kick things off. So yeah, I think it's really great for creatives. And then, again, kind of I'd say the biggest connector between more of the creative space and, more engineering on the software side is like a UI UX design. And there's a lot of great tools out there that are just enabling these designers to get better and better and just faster, which again, I think there's the worry for some of these designers and creative people to maybe lose their jobs, but it also allows them to be faster and more efficient, right? So if you're a single, contractor and you're doing contract work, instead of only being able to pick up maybe one contract at a time with some of these AI tools, you may be able to pick up 2 or 3 at a time, make your work more efficient. So yeah, it's a huge topic. And I think we'll probably have a few more of these webinars to continue to kind of isolate in on some more of these subtopics. But we're a minute over time, but I appreciate everybody being on. I don't know if anyone has any questions or any requests for a topic next month. Please drop it in the chat. Let us know. But otherwise, it was great chatting with everybody. Brandon, if you have anything else.
Yeah, no, actually, if you have any ideas for specific art that you would like generated from some of these, Dolly or Midjourney or any of those, post them up here and we can do that next time. Hopefully we'll do that sidebar and get more content for that. But yeah, it's exciting. So another thing is if you have any ideas or thoughts, or you want to talk a little bit more about this, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to work on some projects with you if you have some ideas.
Yeah. All righty.
Awesome, guys. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.